It is beyond absurd that we live in such broken times where games get released when they're only around 50% complete. But at least, when it comes to these modern day half-assed games, every other company has the decency to continue working on that product. Sure, it takes them years, but at least they're updating their games. Resident Evil 3 Remake was released in a completely half-assed state and was never updated after the date it released. There are so many things that ended up being cut from the remake to the point that if I analyzed every single one of them, I'd make a video long enough to compete with the length of the game's story mode. A lot of YouTubers have talked about these differences, like the absence of most enemies and locations, but what wasn't criticized enough, I'd say, is the beginning portion of the game. I'm talking about the first 10 minutes of the game. Actually, I'm wrong. It starts crumbling even sooner, the intro cutscene. In the original, they had two introductions, a narration of Jill explaining what's happened so far, then a cinematic cutscene showing the current state of the Raccoon City outbreak. The tone fits perfectly with this one. When Jill describes the events, you get the feeling that this is going to be the last part of the game series. That's how I felt about it. After all, it was the third game. It felt like the complete trilogy at the time. I heard this actually was meant to be the last game. If so, it makes sense. I also heard that the developers wanted to make Code Veronica be titled Resident Evil 3. I am so glad they didn't do that. The conclusion to Raccoon City should be the third game, so they chose wisely. Anyways, the intro cutscene kicks in, and let me tell you one thing. No other Resident Evil game has ever delivered with a better cinematic introduction than this.
What are they? No!
Let me describe why this is such an impactful cutscene. It feels like you're witnessing in person the horrifying outbreak spreading endlessly throughout the crowded streets of Raccoon City. There's nothing but panic and chaos in all directions. If you play the previous two RE games and then this one, this intro really hits you hard. Because you know how it went from containing the T-Virus at the Spencer Mansion in the middle of the Arklay Forest to reaching Raccoon City and fully contaminating it. In RE1, there were some casualties, but only from those at the Spencer Mansion and Arklay Forest. But then in Resident Evil 2, you see that the T-Virus started to spread in Raccoon City not too long ago. From what we were shown in RE2, it looked like the virus had only spread in certain areas of the city, perhaps just the closest spots next to the Arklay Forest, and there was possibly still a chance of saving it. I know, the beginning of RE3 actually comes before Resident Evil 2, but again, RE2 did not show us panic in the streets. They showed us like a small sample of the outbreak. So you played the previous games. At the end of RE2, both Leon and Claire end up outside of Raccoon City. So you don't know how the situation is in the city, but you just beat the game, and it kind of feels like maybe the city's not completely doomed after all. I mean, you just took down tons of zombies, creatures, and William Birkin, including his G embryos. So maybe it's not completely screwed? Not many zombies were seen roaming through the streets. I always thought that maybe it was just a portion of the city dealing with the outbreak, but when I finally got to play Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, I was completely shocked to see that the entire city was infested with zombies. You know, when Robert Kendall said that to us. I actually thought that he was exaggerating, but when you see it for yourself, it just leaves you speechless. I haven't even mentioned how the police, SWAT teams, and even Umbrella mercenaries acted fast to try and contain the situation. But with the endless hordes of zombies showing up everywhere, their numbers start to drop immediately. When you see them arrive, you get the sense that there's still a shred of hope remaining, and maybe maybe they can handle the situation seeing as they're fully locked and loaded, and most of all, they're fighting together. But it all ends quickly within minutes. The streets are silenced from gunshots, and rain begins to pour, giving you the feeling that all hope is lost and everyone is dead. I've never seen such a striking introduction to a zombie outbreak. Usually games and movies stick to the whole X days later, or a montage of news reports showing quick glimpses of the outbreak. And unfortunately, this is what they chose for the intro of the Resident Evil 3 remake.
Boo.
This pandemic has spread faster than any disease in modern
Boo.
history.
Angry mobs roam the city, burning buildings. Authorities
Boo.
are bracing for more rioting tonight.
He was knocked unconscious. He had severe last.
Boo.
A citywide emergency has been declared.
The CDC is quarantining the Midwestern region of the U.S.
Commitment, honesty, integrity, these are the core values
Ooh.
that create the foundation for Umbrella Corp.
Boo.
That's great.
Boo.
They actually presented this to us in that news report cliche. Why did the developers think that this would top off the original game's intro? Did they not even think of trying to top it off?
This is wrong.
Did they really just accept that it was going to be too difficult to replicate something similar to that intro, so they said screw that, that's a lot of work. We need an easier and cheaper way to present the intro. Actually, now that I think about it, I'm 100% sure they actually chose that shitty news intro because they didn't want to commit to getting many additional face models for the civilians, officers, and mercenaries, because you know how they have to get actors to replicate their faces into the game. That just wasn't going to happen. They only have a handful of face models to go with. That's probably why we never saw any civilians at a close enough distance. Or more like it is the reason why. Look at their faces. They reused faces of main characters here. There's Leon. There's another Leon. And a Robert Kendo? So this is why they made it impossible to see a civilian's face at the train station? I guess that's always going to be a problem for future games using the new RE engine. But yeah, I think that's got to be part of the reason why the developers chose to half-ass the remake intro. There's no tension that builds from seeing this. With the RE2 remake, they did a pretty good job giving us something similar but new with that intro. What is this? It's so generic, cliched, but most of all, pathetic and weak. I've said enough about the intro. Now let's finally get to the game. The first 10 minutes of the game. The game begins with Jill waking up in her apartment and everything looks colorless. You're in first person mode and can only guess that they did this to sort of build up to Jill's appearance once she looks at herself in the mirror. I can't say that's a bad introduction for her, especially since they're no longer using Julia Vought's likeness to portray Jill, and instead we have a new Jill played by Nicole Tompkins and modeled after Sasha Zotova. I like it. Both versions look great. I can accept this. This scene is meant to show that Jill is traumatized by the events of the Spencer mansion. It completely becomes pointless, as she will never show any signs of trauma throughout the rest of the game. In fact, she acts like a tough guy the entire time. It's as if this nightmare sequence was just there to tease us into thinking that this journey is going to be full of character development for Jill, and possibly include another nightmare sequence where she can confront her previous enemies. Like with the Resident Evil 3 manhwa. I really wanted to see that nightmare sequence that occurs only in the manhwa of Biohazard 3: The Last Escape because it felt like the perfect way to confront what started her trauma in the first place. I made a video translating the entire nightmare sequence so you can see for yourself how it could have fit perfectly for the original and remake games. But in that version, Jill has a nightmare in the chapel after the nemesis had infected her, and she ends up back at the Spencer mansion where she confronts her worst fears once again. It was a fantastic way to make Jill face her fears and is no longer traumatized by the end. But here, it's once again a half-assed attempt at making Jill seem like she's traumatized. But since it never gets brought up again, nor does she act like she's traumatized throughout the entire game, it's just pointless as hell. So she wakes up from that nightmare and everything is in color. You can look around and analyze some of the notes on the wall or on the table, and once again, you gotta go to the bathroom and make Jill look at herself in the mirror. After this, it switches to the third-person gameplay. Unfortunately, you can't go into other rooms or exit the apartment room to look around since the only option you have is to answer the phone. It won't stop ringing, so you can't even have the option of letting an alternate cutscene occur. So you pick up the phone, Brad calls Jill and warns her that she has to leave her apartment right away. And only seconds later, immediately the nemesis breaks through the wall, completely covered in trash bags, including his face, and he just pummels Jill around for a bit, just enough for her to get back up and exit the apartment. I don't like this at all for too many reasons. For starters, this is the worst introduction for the nemesis. We haven't even encountered a single zombie, and already we're met with what is supposed to be the biggest threat in the game? This has zero build-up. If anything, it makes Nemi look like a complete moron for having such an advantage and still allowing Jill to escape countless times within a minute. This is why it was important to introduce the nemesis as the tyrant that quickly eliminates Brad Vickers in front of Jill. There's no tension or build-up with this execution. The controls are somewhat locked as well. You can't turn around, not even with the 180-degree turn. Jill will only run straight ahead, just straight up linear. This is where the developer should have inserted himself into the game to physically hold her hand along the way, because none of this is actually player choice. Then there's this. Nemi can break through a brick wall, but he can't get through a wooden door? Dude, even a zombie could break that door open. And again, how is anyone supposed to see Nemesis as a threat if this is all it takes to prevent him from getting you? You could just sit around in this random apartment room and relax. Nothing will be triggered until you go through the window. Here's another problem with this sudden Nemesis chase encounter. Why start things off slow for the first minute and then hit the NOS in the next? One of the hugest problems this game has is that it rushes everything. That's why I always refer to this remake as a movie, because a movie based on Resident Evil 3 would not possibly be able to include every enemy and location from the game. It'd be understandable there, but this is a game, so they can pace themselves. And if they chose to start the game slow, then they should have committed to it and build up to the action. Let Jill interact with her neighbors and slowly rise the chaos that suddenly hits so that we can see for ourselves how shit went down south. But this is rushing too much. It doesn't help that it's too linear, and you know that Nemesis isn't a threat when even a rubber band can escape his ass. Once you're finally outside of the apartment, Brad will suddenly run by like, oh hey Jill. In the original, Brad was portrayed exactly like his character was described. Chicken heart. A man that would cower and run from these problems rather than facing them.
Get away!
Brad, hang in there. Why isn't someone doing something about this?
I didn't know you were still alive, Jill. The police aren't trained for this kind of situation. What could they do? Listen, he's coming for us. We're both gonna die.
What are you saying?
You'll see. He's after STARS members. There's no escape. Jill!
Brad!
We've gotta...
The remake for Resident Evil 3 has Brad walk with Jill for about 30 seconds, and then he dies.
Brad! Here they come!
In here! on, Jill. We know how this ends.
No, I don't.
Are we still a team?
Always.
Then do me a favor. Don't fuck up like I did. Go!
I'm sorry, Brad.
He sacrifices himself, which was ridiculously pointless because no one needed to hold the door. They both could have simply gone through the back door. I mean, how long did it take for those zombies to go through the back door? 5 seconds? Maybe less? But since this is a linear rushed game with some unexplained logic, then they quickly get rid of Brad in the most rushed and disappointing way. Sure, you could say that he redeems himself for trying to hold the door while Jill runs out the back, but this rushed execution just makes him seem stupid rather than heroic, since those zombies immediately appear once you go through the back door. And what comes next? More hand-holding. God, I wish it was never the issue here, because look around. This part of town is beautiful. I want to explore it. Let go of my fucking hand game. Let me explore this place. Let me enter the theater, the hotels, any of these buildings. Don't show me them including familiar locations at a close distance and then never give me the chance to explore them. This is the complete opposite of what the original RE3 did. We had so many branching paths throughout that game, and most of them had us exploring the city. This is like a Disneyland attraction. I thought I was playing a Resident Evil game, not Super Mario 1, where you can't backtrack because the game won't allow it. There are multiple times that this game does not allow you to turn around and go back, and I'm only talking about the first 10 minutes of the game. It gets worse throughout the game. Now let's look at the next problem we meet here. Taking the parking lot elevator to the building rooftop. God, I miss the old parking lot. I bring this up because this portion of the game combines two things that were present in the original: the parking lot and the helicopter that arrives at Jill's rescue. In the original, you end up backtracking through the parking lot a good amount of times. In fact, there's a live option sequence that occurs in the parking lot, making it a memorable location because of how it gives the player options. In the remake, the parking lot is just a quick location that you rapidly breeze through. And what makes it even more aggravating is that they threw in the helicopter that attempts to rescue Jill, but they put it in the beginning of the game. I know the chopper fails to rescue Jill in the original, but it was a hell of an impact when it was taken down at the end of the clock tower. You had already gone through so much shit, so it actually felt like maybe this was the end. The clock tower was awesome. It was a location we don't explore in the fucking remake. They built up to it. You didn't just find a chopper, that's too convenient. The chopper then suddenly explodes here and Nemesis appears next to it. How did he take it down? I don't know. His tentacles weren't exposed. He wasn't carrying any weapons either. It just exploded. Then Jill gets in a car with a zombie in it. It doesn't wake up even though there aren't any visible gunshots or anything to show that someone killed that zombie. Feels like a rushed movie with conveniences, right? And then Jill crashes into Nemesis and goes off the rooftop. How did this not kill her? How many floors were there? 5? That should have been enough to kill a man. Nemesis isn't exactly filled with cushions. He's covered in trash bags, but those trash bags don't have any cushions, so Jill, you're supposed to be dead by now. But plot armor saves anyone that carries a story. Carlos then shows up and saves Jill. But here's the stupid part. Yet another one, I guess. Carlos fires a rocket at Nemesis. He catches it without looking. But then when Carlos fires a second rocket with Nemesis now fully aware, he takes the hit. What the hell kind of logic is that? Why did he counter the first one like a ninja, but stood there like an idiot when he fired a second one? I'm telling you, if logic made sense in this remake, Jill would have been dead after crashing the car from 5 stories high. And Carlos would have been killed right here as well because of the first rocket. Nemesis would just point it at his direction. Why wouldn't he? Why point the first rocket at a safe direction if he's meant to be the most intelligent tyrant so far? As you can see, this game's intro alone is just one massive disappointment. I mean, I only dedicated this video analyzing the first 10 minutes of the game and its introduction. Look how long it took just to cover those problems. I like the looks of this Raccoon City remake, so it truly sucks when you can't explore over 80% of what you see here. This game can be great. Everybody knows this. But we know that this feels like a fun demo and it desperately needs a lot of DLC to make up for it. But it looks like it'll never get a single kilobyte of DLC. So like always, fans are just gonna have to take matters into their own hands and pick up the pieces, because no one at Capcom truly cares about what their fans want. Not unless it sold millions of copies. That'll get them to re-release the game, but not add anything new to it. That's it for the video. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button to give this video a chance to grow. I'd like to thank all my Patreon supporters for their impeccable generosity. Your support means a lot to me, and you are part of the reason why I try to make the best content that I can. And if you like this content, check out the rest of my channel. You'll find more entertainment from separate franchises I like to cover, such as Mortal Kombat, Dragon Ball Z, Celebrity Deathmatch, Men in Black, The Mask, Batman comics, The Terminator, TMNT, Dino Crisis, Resident Evil, and more. If you're a Patreon supporter, check out my exclusive videos such as the Gantz content. And if you'd like to show your support, go to my Patreon and support the channel, which is only $1. Sacrifice that McChicken for extra quality content, my friend. But anyways, I'll see you all in the next video, and remember to have an awesome day.